Now that ANSYS has solved our boundary value problem numerically and obtained the displacements at the nodes, let's move to post-processing. In static structural problems, I like to take a look at the deformed shape first and the displacement field because we have an intuitive sense of how things are going to deform. You know, you hold something here and pull something here. We have an intuition of what's going to happen. I've seen students, they do complicated problems and the only thing they would look at is the one means stress. And I would recommend looking at something like the deformed shape where you have much more intuition before looking at something much more abstract such as one means stress. I'll go into ANSYS and I'll highlight solution in the tree, and that'll give me the post-processing options, and I'll select deformation, total, and I'll say right click and evaluate all results. Okay. And so that gives me the deformation. So this is, the total deformation at each point, u squared plus v squared, square root of that. And I like to usually view it, go here and select show undeformed wireframe. So the solid line is the undeformed wireframe, and then when I pull it, you see it shrinks a little bit in the vertical direction because of the Poisson's ratio, and it moves to the right, and which is what I expect. And I can play with the magnification here. I can super magnify it, for instance, or I can go to true scale. And at true scale, I can hardly see the deformation, which is good because we have a pretty stiff plate. So I'll just go back to auto scale, and if I click escape, I probably get rid. So this is just showing me when, that's the center on which if I rotate the model, it'll rotate, which I really don't want. I can go here and just come here. So ignore this red circle. Maybe somehow, you can get rid of it by pressing escape or something. I'm not going to worry about it here. And notice, what's happening at the bottom boundary, right? It's just moving to the right, which means that, okay, that has been, or that boundary condition has been applied correctly. Similarly, at the left boundary, you can check that that boundary condition has been applied correctly. So this is good for checking boundary conditions. And then if I look at the variation, I see that as I move away from the hole, this is just, becoming, it's just varying in this direction. There's very little variation in that direction, which is what I expect, because you're moving to a 1D situation. So that's also good. And if you also want to look at the value and make sure that the value is reasonable. So it's pretty small, in terms of inches, which is reasonable. And we can also check it against hand calculations, which I'll get to in a moment. So what I'll do is instead of plotting the total deformation, I will highlight solution in the tree and I'll say deformation directional. And I want the deformation in X, which will give me U, and I'll say, I'll in fact rename and I'll say that's actually U as a function of X and Y. Just the U component of the displacement. And then I'll say right click, post-processing, evaluate all results. That's ANSYS lingo for post-processing. And here, okay, this is just U, and this value here you can check. So the 0, the value over here, the maximum value, you can check against the hand calculation that I indicated. By making the 1D assumption, you'll just get a 1D stress state, and you can figure out what the U displacement needs to be at the right boundary and check it against this value. So that's a good sanity check. And I can also plot, I can show the elements. So I can go here and I'll say, instead of showing the undeformed wireframe, show the elements. And I can also, just turn the deformation off. And if I zoom in here, I can probe. I can hit probe here and let's say, probe the value there. And remember, that's coming from an interpolation. So if I go and select the node, so if I select this and hold down the control key, I can select all the nodes which are used in that interpolation. Okay, so that value is coming from an interpolation of these 8 values, and that's a second order, interpolation, which we talked about. And then I can go in here and I can delete that label. So if I select this, and I can go click and select delete. Okay, it's not too obvious. I can zoom out here, and if I go to, I think I need to say single select, or maybe go to geometry and come back to this view. Those nodes are not selected anymore, and that's all there is to post-processing the deformation. And if I want to take a snapshot of that, I can go in here and I can say there is a save. Yeah, this I can say image to file. I can use that option, or I can come in here in Windows and select the snipping tool, and just say new, and just snip the right area. That's not quite the area I wanted, but you get the idea. So I'll not save it over here, but you might want to, and I'll say File, Save Project.